Fiji is probably the natural place to start. We're in that kind of lovely, slightly mad flux part of the season where there's a bit of Pro Day there, there's a bit of top 14 on the horizon, there's still international rugby, there's National kicking off left, right, and centre. It's all going on, but I suppose it's fair to say the focal point was France Fiji at the Matmut Atlantique, which looked fantastic, as it always does. Brilliant, brilliant ground. Probably, yeah, mad to think that it is actually officially a ground of what is now like a fourth division football team, given poor old Girondins issues. Where do we start on France Fiji? Because it was what 34-21 the final score, and I I don't know. I feel like France could have lost this. had a few things gone up the other way, but I'd be keen to get your thoughts.
So I've full disclosure, I didn't watch it live, and actually catching up, I've watched it in like four different parts effectively. So for me, it feels quite like quite a bitty game, but I think that is possibly because of how I watched it in bits. I did few guys that from uni were kind of talking about how they wanted to watch France Fiji, but it was going to clash with Ireland Australia, and I said, "Oh, just watch that. Like, watch France Fiji over Ireland Australia. Like, Australia are average, Ireland are pretty boring, whereas you can watch Tuisova and Wanikolo, and at least Wanikolo delivered. But I don't know if it was quite the rollicking affair that perhaps you might have expected had you seen the names on the sheets. Um, there was obviously some very flair bits and some very cool bits in the game, but I don't know whether it was, it wasn't quite jouet the whole match. I think that was possibly because France defended pretty well.
Yeah, they did defend quite well.
Um,
They did all right.
and they kind of executed a pretty simple game plan pretty well. But that's kind of my
Yeah.
my view is that it was. I don't just on your question, like did it feel? I don't think France were ever really in danger. I don't think, but that
Oh,
might have just
I
been how I watched
firmly,
it.
I firmly disagree with that. I think they were obviously it was weird in the sense that it felt like there
Well,
were
they
real
rattled.
stages, right? So they went. I mean, they were 21 nil up, and
Yeah.
then it was 21 all, and Fiji were more than value. I think for that sort of initial comeback, and ultimately, I think the thing that kind of killed Fiji, and also one of the reasons why it felt so disjointed at points, was Fiji's line out, having actually been really good against England, basically disappeared. Like they just it just went to shit basically. And I think it prevented them getting that sort of consistency of ball that therefore allowed them to do the mad stuff that they did do on a handful of occasions. But I think you're right. I think France defended like pretty well. Like they were very organised. Charles Olivon, who was man of the match, was like looked head and shoulders above. I think pretty much every other forward on the pitch.
Ooh, bit harsh, but yeah, go on.
Go on, who else was up there?
I actually think Greg Aldrit defensively in a game
Yeah,
that
he was
was
okay.
France did a lot of defending. It's weird to think that your number eight, you've kind of got him in there as one of your best tacklers and your best jackler, and not because he's a brilliant, like, well, he is a very good ball carrier. But the thing that they've missed with him absent is actually his defensive work and his jackling. I thought he
Yeah,
was. I also thought Roman Talfa was brilliant, like his
okay.
physicality. I thought he was
Yeah,
really good.
think I like Roman Tao. I think he is. I think he makes too many mistakes at international level and has done for a while. He still slips off too many tackles for someone of that size. I think there was Aldrit, Jegu was pretty. I'd say that. So they were
Well, Jegu
industrious.
basically wasn't a forward for
Yeah, but he
he
got
played
himself
majority of the
about.
game in the back. Yeah.
But I do think I don't know. I there's a bit of stick going Galtier's way, and I kind of get it. I think if you're 21 nil up in 20 minutes, 34-21 isn't really acceptable. Um, Particularly given, I think, well, there's a massive moment which has sort of done the rounds on social media, which is Rodrigue Netti, the clearest red card you will ever see, not referred by the South African TMO, who it turns out is is in on the conspiracy, which believe it or not, which was a bit of a twist. But yeah, I think Fiji were pretty good value. I think France, there's a real
But France are in the lead at that point, and
yeah, but
there's like 10 minutes left.
yeah, but they're 6 points ahead. It's not like they weren't 15
Yeah,
points clear. I think you're giving them too much credit for their performance.
no, I
Um,
just don't think. I just think like it's. You could be like, oh, should have been red, but how much? I don't know if that changes the result if he does go off. Do you know what I mean?
well, yeah,
It's not.
I
It's
don't
not.
know.
It's not like at that point they were. It was 50 minutes and they were still 21-0 up, and then they shat the bed with 15 men when they should have actually had 14. Imagine what might have happened. It was kind of like, okay, the game is on a knife edge, but there's not. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't think. Like it's not a key moment in the game in the same way that
well,
one in the Yaga one in the last week was.
yeah, maybe. I sort of disagree a bit. I think, but they, I think France, they just, it just isn't quite. Something isn't quite there at the moment. And I know we've spoken a bit about Roman Ntamack and how he'd come back into some really great form for Toulouse. And it's difficult because Chris Ashton on commentary kind of picked it up when Luku went off and said he'd had, pretty good, and he had a pretty decent game and controlled, I think, territory reasonably well in
Yeah,
not great conditions and knocked himself out on the post, which was an unbelievable
one
touch.
of the great moments of the weekend.
It's incredible. Ravovo just steps inside enough to send him into the post. It's remarkable work. But he just
I
said
did see some bitter South African fans saying if he was South African, it'd be a red card and a 4-week ban for a no arms tackle. So, oh well, ball off.
superb. But
I don't
there's
think Luca was
something.
fantastic though. Luca was
He wasn't
fine.
he wasn't brilliant, no, but by no shape. But I think the point Ashton was making is it felt like he needed a bit more help and a bit more.
Yeah,
I think proactivity is the thing that I would say with there just doesn't seem to be, and he's quite an aloof character, but there
he's
just
just
doesn't
quite
seem to
anonymous. This
be.
is the point I've made in the past. He's just quite for a fly half. And I've said it before. I know we're used to the likes of George Ford and Finn Russell who are involved in absolutely everything in attack or everything in the whole game. But he's just quite anonymous for a fly half, I think.
And in a game like that, which the one thing you want to do against a team like Fiji is just your sort of nuts and bolts control. If you're not getting it through, I think the thing that summed it up for me was he basically seemed like he kind of wasn't on the pitch for 25 minutes and then collected like a brilliant up and under
Hmm.
and sort of distributed it off down the left wing somewhere. And you kind of think there's no like skill issue with this like with this guy. Like I just don't quite get it. It's a strange one, but he was, as you say, he was largely anonymous. A guy who wasn't, and I think it's probably the one to maybe talk about, which is quite exciting from a French point of view, is Nicolas Deporter, who was well, he was fantastic in
Yeah.
in a slightly sticky back line. And we were saying, I guess, in the week a little bit, he's a guy who feels like he's still young, but he's kind of had to bide his time maybe a bit more than like you'd have hoped, given his
Yeah.
evident quality. And for me, the thing that was really exciting about this is that regardless of, he just can clearly mix it like physically, like
Yeah.
properly. And that's got to be exciting, given that that's not necessarily. I mean, he is obviously a really physical big centre, but you're not like, oh, his
It's not to us
USP is
over.
his
Yeah.
Tuasova, Tuolangi,
Yeah.
whoever. But to have that is very exciting, I think, for France.
Yeah. I think he perhaps it was the kind of sudden re-emergence of Pierre-Louis Barassi this time last year, I guess, that kind of um, meant that the likes of him and the Deporter and Gaeton didn't get the game time that they perhaps might have thought. And I do still think the ceiling of Deporter and Gaeton is higher than Barassi for as much as
Agreed.
Barassi is doing well. I think just on Gautier, I think he does have a bit of a case to answer because as much as I enjoy, well, no, I don't enjoy it, but as much as I regularly lay into Ntamack as an attack, as like a fly half, Toulouse aren't struggling in attack, and
Yeah,
that is a very, very
yeah,
similar backline. So the answer is either Paul Grau or more likely the coaching. And I think since Arletas came in after the World Cup, he didn't have very good pedigree through his time in Perpignan, and they have not really, other than the odd game, like obviously they completely blew Italy away, but other than the odd game, they've not shown that much in attack, and
mm,
especially if you ignore the moments where they rely on instinctive
got a bit of broken
individual
field
quality, but
brilliance.
yeah, like a bit of broken field brilliance from that back three, which is up there with certainly up there
Yeah,
with one of the best in the world in attack for sure.
yeah,
And Saturday, for as much as it's Deporter that's scored a couple of tries, that's kind of largely like the bits of the positive in attack were well. I guess they kind of picked up on Fiji errors, but that wasn't an attacking shape that Barassi runs that line and finds Deporter, and it wasn't really an attacking shape that Ramos finds that inside ball to Deporter. It's just those guys saw the space. Maybe that is their coaching philosophy, but they are not attacking in remotely the same way that Toulouse are, and it's
yeah,
and
and
it's
certainly
very
not,
similar personnel,
and
very similar personnel.
certainly not with any degree of consistency either.
No,
I think that's the thing that was so frustrating actually in that, and obviously Springboks totally different proposition, but was so frustrating in that was that there were just those kind of glimmers, weren't there? And it was snuffed out often through either kind of errors or just a bit of poor decision making where and maybe this might be hindsight 2020, but maybe where you need your 10 screaming for the ball to get it wide, and they were going one phase too close to the ruck.
they weren't. They were barely ever set up to attack. I
Yeah,
think against South Africa, and it's always looks that way when a defense is really really good, which is what South Africa have done to so many sides in the past. But yeah, I think the coaching has to have questions asked of it. Sean Edwards, it feels like whenever they have like a bad defensive performance, the next game, there's always like majority is pretty good. Like I think they made so many tackles and their shape was like to actually restrict that Fiji team to three
yeah,
tries is quite impressive. And they were kind of a little bit. It was like all three were quite weird tries in their own way. Um, but yeah, I think the attacking wise, I'm glad they sorted their line out both in attack and defense. The fact they actually challenged is more encouraging.
yes,
I don't know
yeah.
why they didn't do that against South Africa, but
Yeah,
there we go.
there we go. Just before we move on to the Australia game coming up, quick words. Our favourite player, or one of, Gita Wine and Golo. I feel like this is great news because he's getting in front of more people. His finish is as good as any finish you're going to see from a winger in traffic.
Yeah,
And I wanted to ask, like, well, semi seriously, at the moment on form, like, where is he in the best wingers in the world? Because
he's top of the Rugby footsie index, Richard, and that's all that matters. Um, I'll be honest. I'm struggling to get the image of Mados Tambwe burning him. I think there's some
what,
negative
earlier in the
marks.
season?
Yeah, when he basically couldn't be bothered. Um, it's an interesting one. I
the
still
the
think if you,
reason that
I still think if I was picking a winger for my life in a game for my life, I'm picking Colby and one other. I think
yeah, I'd
whether
probably
that
agree.
is
If I'm
like
picking a winger that has to score a try with a 3 minute countdown from behind his own posts, I'm probably picking Jeter Wine and Golo.
Dakawanga, mate,
Nakawanga can have
Makalu.
it. We are. That's true. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Proper winger.
Um, uh,
I
yeah,
think
it's a fair
the
question. It's a fair
reason
question.
I ask it is that he's just been doing these ridiculous things for so long, and he was excellent against England. And like, what more of a proof point do you need that this guy like really is top draw than that sort of finish against a side like France. And I think sometimes I definitely fall into the trap a bit of being like, oh, Fijians wang it around a bit, etc. And obviously there is a lot of that, but like the genuine the skill and the strength and on the bloke is just remarkable.
Yeah, I
And
think
it's I think it's just a shame that Toulon let go of him because
yeah,
he's the sort of guy who could win you a final.
yeah. I think
Challenge Cup
he
final maybe for
he's
Leon.
yeah he's better under the high ball and defensively than a lot of wingers of that ilk. But he can't be the best winger in the world, Richard, because he's not won the rugby championship. So, and we know that you can't be the best at anything in world rugby if you haven't won the rugby championship. So,
True.
tough luck, Juta. But you have to make do with the Rosbeast Rugby Fijian footsie index.
The footsie was surging
Footsie.
after that. My
Yeah.
goodness me.
A Canaveri, he could get on there.
There was dodgy cash coming in from left, right, and centre. Yeah, it kind of
Yeah.
varied, definitely could. So on to Australia on Saturday. Australia have had a pretty. They look a bit cooked, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
Want to get home and watch the Ashes on the horizon. I don't blame them. I guess the news it seems from France is that there's going to be a debut off the bench. They reckon for sexy Cal Van Gorge, which is quite cool. Um, Otherwise, it looks like everyone's sort of back. Fiku back at 12 is the suggestion. Flamel
The,
Meafu.
yeah. So Barassi obviously went off injured with a HIA, and then I think Guyton lasted about the same amount of time, but they were both done within half an hour. Guyton had a concussion. I read that he would have been back in training on Monday, but I'm going to assume that
Okay,
he isn't because he's not in that 23, and I'd like to think that he would be otherwise.
yeah,
There's enough credit in the bank there.
100%. I don't think
Um,
that's in doubt if he was fit.
and as much as Calvin Gorge has been in good form, Guyton is in brilliant form. Maybe he'll go back to POW, where
Wow.
which was on the
Yeah,
commentary.
yeah.
That really ground my gears.
I knew as soon as I heard that, I kind of enjoyed it every time I heard it. I knew you'd be sat there like, oh god.
um, but yeah, so there is obviously Fiki comes back in, which is completely natural. I do think that is their best centre partnership because of what we talked about last week of Barassi and Fiki being too similar.
Agreed.
Um, but a space has opened up for him, and his good looks have clearly gotten the nod over Fabian Browbury. I think actually, on a serious note,
Quite
I
right
think
too.
Browbury is I would say an out and out 12. I don't think he is I mean, he could play 13, but he's not going to cover wing or fullback. Whereas Gorge has played quite a bit at fullback because he even played a little bit of
Mm,
10 in age grade stuff. Um, and probably, given he's got that pace, could play wing pretty comfortably. So you're kind of covering 10 to 15 with Gorge. Obviously, if Entomac goes down, it's going to be Ramos that slots in at 10. But my point is that he's there on versatility and he's got a brilliant skill set. So very exciting.
yeah, yeah. Should be fun. And I'm kind of hoping
And
that
Boulon's
maybe
injured. That's the other one.
yes.
Boulon's out for like 4 to 6 weeks.
Is it that long? Is it? Oh, I hadn't
Yeah, so
realised that.
I read today that he's done for the year, basically. He's going to miss Champions Cup the first couple of rounds.
Paul Boudon, who I found out in the week, apparently is a massive ice hockey fan and was an ice hockey player in his youth, which doesn't surprise me. He's got that sort of American
Yeah,
Buzz
doesn't look like he
Lightyear
needs the shoulder
jaw.
pads. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's not a lad you want flying into you on skates, is it, Paul
no.
Boudon? That's
Which
something
means,
else.
but that does mean that Olivon slots in at 7. And having seen the way those guys operated, I do think a back row of Jelonch, Olivon, Aldrit now all of a sudden does look like
Looks proper,
the
doesn't
best.
it?
Weirdly enough, like the back row that could have been the back row for.
Yeah,
I think it was actually the back row in that quarterfinal that they lost.
yeah, it was. Yeah, they're getting the
Um,
band back together.
yeah,
You know who's next? The
Mackley.
front man, Macaulay. It's only a matter of
Do you know?
time.
Do you know? Do you know who I would like back from that quarterfinal? Mathieu Jalabert, who conveniently is fit to play against Pau, against Poe on Friday night. Conveniently fit,
Is he?
right at the end of the autumn internationals. That curious medicine that Fabien Galtier had administered to him has worked perfectly.
Amazing. But yeah, we'll see. I think I'd like to think we might see something a bit more against possibly a slightly tired Australia team.
Go on then, Richard.
Um,
Can they rack up 50?
yeah, I think they can. I mean, what did Ireland put past them? 40 was it at the
Yeah.
weekend? I think they can. I
Are
don't
we
know.
going to see like a 50? Which is more likely, a 27-21 to France or a 54-10 to France? Which do you think is more likely on Saturday?
But probably the 27-21. 54 is quite a hammering, isn't it? But I do think Australia have checked out a bit, and I get it. It feels like they've played about 1,000 games of rugby
Yeah.
in the last few months. But yeah, hopefully some tries.